The chapel was packed with mourners when Louis stepped forward, my father's ashes still settling in the urn behind him. I sat in the front row, numb, watching my older brother straighten his tie like he was about to deliver a boardroom presentation instead of a eulogy. "Dad left me in charge of everything," Louis announced, his voice steady and confident. He pulled a document from his jacket pocket, waving it for everyone to see. "I have his will right here." My stomach twisted. Something was wrong. Dad and I had discussed his company, Dalton Construction, just weeks before his heart attack. He'd never mentioned changing anything. Louis had been pushing me out slowly for months, turning clients away from me, whispering things to Dad about my emotional instability. Louis held the document higher. "As executor, I'm taking full control of the company, the accounts, and all assets." The room erupted in whispers. Relatives leaned toward each other, nodding like this made perfect sense. But I knew Louis. I'd watched him manipulate Dad for years, and now, standing over his casket at his own funeral, he was stealing everything. Then the chapel doors opened. A woman I hadn't seen in months stepped inside, and Louis's jaw went completely white. Susan Walsh, Dad's attorney. The woman Louis had said retired 6 months ago. She walked down the center aisle in a charcoal blazer, her gray eyes locked on Louis. The room fell silent. She moved with a kind of quiet confidence that made everyone instinctively straighten up. "That document," she said calmly, stopping beside the pulpit, "is a forgery." Louis stepped back like she'd slapped him. "That's not, Susan, you have no right to." "I have every right," she interrupted. "I was your father's attorney for 23 years. And I'm holding his real will." The chapel erupted. People stood up. Someone gasped. Louis's face turned from white to red, and for a moment I thought he might collapse. Susan turned to me, and when our eyes met, she gave the smallest nod. "Brooke," she said quietly, "it's time everyone knew the truth. My name is Brooke Dalton, and I'm 32 years old. For the past 10 years, I'd worked alongside my father building Dalton Construction into one of the most respected companies in the state. We specialized in commercial projects, office buildings, shopping centers, developments that shaped our entire city. I was the one who calculated every bid. I was the one who managed the timelines. I was the one clients called when they had questions because they trusted me. Louis, my older brother, had never been interested in construction. He'd bounced between jobs, spent too much time at clubs, and somehow always ended up asking Dad for money. But Dad was too kind to say no. Then, about a year ago, everything shifted. Louis suddenly wanted to be involved in the company. He started attending meetings. He began advising Dad on decisions. And slowly, deliberately, he started cutting me out. He'd schedule meetings without me. He'd tell Dad I'd made mistakes I hadn't made. He'd whisper to clients that I was overwhelmed or unreliable. I didn't understand why until Dad's health started failing. That's when I realized Louis had a plan all along. 3 days after Dad's heart attack, while he was still in the hospital, I went to his office to find his insurance information for the bills. The desk drawer was locked. That was unusual. Dad never locked anything from me. I found the key in the plant where he always hid important things, and my hands shook as I opened it. Inside was an envelope with my name on it, in Dad's handwriting. "Brooke, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong." My heart stopped. I opened it slowly. The letter was dated 3 months earlier, right around the time Louis started becoming aggressive about taking over. "I know what Louis is doing," Dad had written. "I see it now. I should have seen it sooner. I'm getting older, and I think I've been letting him manipulate me because I want to believe he's changed. But he hasn't. He's become worse. If something happens to me, he will try to take everything. Don't let him. Trust Evelyn. She has copies of everything. Talk to her first. Love you, Dad." My knees nearly buckled. Dad had known. He'd left me a message from beyond, and it was a roadmap. The last line made my chest tighten. "Talk to Evelyn." I drove to Susan's office the next day, my father's letter burning in my bag. The office was dark. The lights were off. The glass doors were sealed with a notice that said the space had been vacated. When I called the building manager, he said Susan had left suddenly 2 weeks ago. Personal reasons, he said. Very rushed. Your brother actually came by asking about her. He wanted to know if she'd taken any client files. My blood ran cold. I tried calling her number, the one I'd had for years. It went straight to a voicemail that said the inbox was full. At the funeral home, making arrangements with Louis, I asked casually where Susan was. Louis's eyes flickered just for a second and he said, "She retired. Didn't you know? She called Dad months ago. Wanted a break." But the building manager had said she left 2 weeks ago. Louis was lying. A janitor who'd worked in that building for years pulled me aside at the grocery store a few days later. "Your brother came by that office," he whispered. There was yelling. Ms. Walsh looked scared. He was threatening her about something. After that, she just left. 2 days after the funeral, Louis took control. He froze my salary. He locked me out of the company email. He moved all the files to an encrypted drive I couldn't access. He sent out an announcement to every client saying I was taking a leave of absence for personal reasons. I still went to the office because I didn't know what else to do. My desk was cleaned out. My nameplate was gone. Louis had my office reassigned to himself. The employees avoided eye contact. A few of the younger ones looked apologetic. My closest work friend, Marcus, pulled me aside in the parking lot. "He's telling people you had a breakdown," Marcus whispered. "He's saying you can't handle the stress, that he's protecting the company by keeping you away. I know it's not true, but nobody wants to go against him. He controls the payroll now." That's when I realized how completely Louis had positioned himself. He'd been planning this for longer than I thought. A week later I got a text from Louis. "Emergency company meeting. 10 a.m. tomorrow." I showed up, thinking maybe this was a chance to defend myself, to explain that Dad's leave of absence was a lie. The boardroom was full. Every manager, every department head. They all turned to look at me when I walked in, their faces carefully blank. Louis stood at the head of the table with his arms crossed. "You can't be in here," he said flatly. "What?" "Louis, I'm still a part." "No, you're not. Not anymore." He moved toward me, and his voice took on this fake concerned tone that made my skin crawl. "After Dad's recent illness, we've all noticed some instability. As the new head of this company, I'm concerned about your ability to lead. I think it's best if you take some time away. For your health." The room was silent. One of the older managers, someone who'd known my father for 30 years, looked down at the table. As I turned to leave, my hands shaking with anger, one of our longest-term clients, a woman named Patricia who'd worked with me on 4 major projects, slipped me something small as she passed. A USB drive. I sat in my car in the parking lot, hands trembling, and plugged the USB into my laptop. What I found made me feel like I was drowning. Email after email showed Louis bribing subcontractors. He'd promised them bonuses if they reported problems on projects I was managing, problems that didn't exist. He'd paid them to slow down work, to create delays, to make me look incompetent. There were spreadsheets showing payments to fake consultants, actually his friends, who'd written reports criticizing my work. There were messages to clients telling them I was difficult to work with, and that Louis would handle things better going forward. One email thread made my chest tight. Louis to a contractor. "Once the old man passes, my sister's done. He's already not thinking clearly. Dad will sign whatever I put in front of him." The dates on these emails went back over a year. Another message said, "This needs to be wrapped up before probate. I need control before any will is read." He'd been planning this execution for over 12 months. One email mentioned Evelyn by name. "The attorney is becoming a problem. She's too loyal to my father. Might need to handle this carefully." I saved every single file to 3 different drives and hid them in my apartment. I couldn't find Susan through normal channels. No social media. No answer at her home number. It was like she'd vanished. But my father's letter had said to trust her. So I dug deeper. After 3 weeks of investigation, I found her name on a visitor list at Riverside Recovery Center, a private facility about 2 hours away. My heart was pounding as I drove there, not even knowing if she'd see me. When I finally found her in the garden area, sitting on a bench overlooking a pond, I barely recognized her. She looked thin, fragile, like something had broken her. When I said my name, her whole body tensed. When I said Lewis's name, fear flashed across her face so raw that it hurt to see. "He warned me," she whispered, looking over her shoulder like he might be hiding in the trees. "He came to my office and told me if I didn't disappear, if I didn't stop interfering with his father's decisions, there would be consequences. He said I wouldn't like those consequences." "Did he hurt you?" I asked. "There was a break-in at my house," she said quietly. "The police said it was random, but I knew it was him. After that I couldn't do anything. I just wanted to disappear." I reached for her hand and she squeezed it so hard it hurt. "He has your father's real will," she said. "I made copies before he found me. Hid them. I was so afraid, Brooke. I didn't know what to do." Susan pulled a sealed envelope from inside her jacket. Her hands were shaking as she opened it. The will was exactly what Dad had described in his letter. Everything split equally between Lewis and me. But there was a clause that made my breath catch. If any beneficiary engages in fraud, forgery, or illegal activity to claim their inheritance, they forfeit their entire share to the other beneficiary. Dad had known. He'd protected me. "Your father added that clause 6 months ago," Susan said. "Right after he started suspecting Lewis. He wanted to be sure that if Lewis tried anything, it wouldn't work." "Will you testify?" I asked. "Will you help me prove this?" Susan was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I've been a coward," she said. "Your father was good to me. He deserved better. And you." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You deserve your father's legacy, not your brother's lies." "Will testify. Whatever I have to do." That was the moment I stopped being afraid. We met with a probate attorney named Andrew Pierce in his downtown office. Every meeting was secret. Lewis had people watching me, I was sure of it. Andrew went through the evidence methodically. The email chain showing the bribes. The fake consultant reports. The threats to Susan. "This is strong," he said, flipping through the documents. "Very strong. But there's one thing we need." "What?" I asked. "We need Lewis to admit it. His own words. Confession. If he confesses, either in writing or verbally recorded, that seals everything." Andrew explained the legal complexity. Without that confession, Lewis could claim the emails were doctored, that the contractors were lying. He could drag this through court for years. "We need him to feel like he's already won," Andrew said. "That's when people get careless. That's when they brag." I thought about Lewis's arrogance. His absolute certainty that he'd gotten away with everything. "I know how to do it," I said quietly. I texted Lewis. "We should talk. Maybe we can work something out." He texted back immediately. He was so confident that he was winning that he didn't hesitate. 2 days later, we were sitting at a fancy restaurant, the kind where they know him by name. Lewis ordered the most expensive wine and smiled at me like I was a bug under glass. "I'm willing to be fair," he said, cutting into his steak. "Dad left you some money in the will, the real will, before he lost his mind. I'll honor that. 20% of the company value. You walk away quietly, and nobody has to know about your little breakdown." My hands were under the table, recording everything on my phone. "It's not really a breakdown," I said, playing the role of the wounded sister. I don't understand why Dad would leave you in control. He never said anything to me." Lewis's eyes lit up. He loved talking about his own cleverness. "Because I made sure he didn't have a choice," Lewis said, taking a sip of wine. "I spent months talking to him, convincing him that you were unstable. I showed him reports. Good ones, very convincing, that questioned your decision-making. By the time I was done, he didn't trust you anymore. Every word was being recorded. What about Evelyn? I asked, my voice small. Louis's expression turned dark. That woman was a problem. She kept pushing Dad to think for himself. So I had to push her out. Took some work, but she got the message. Now she's gone and nobody cares. He raised his glass. By the time this probate finishes, it'll all be mine. The company, the land, the buildings, everything. Dad's legacy becomes mine. He was so drunk on his own victory that he didn't see me smiling. Louis had made one mistake during dinner. He'd been drunk and bragging, and he'd mentioned where the forged will was created. Small place downtown, he'd said. Nothing fancy. The guy who runs it doesn't ask questions. Perfect for what I needed. Took me 2 days to find it. Henderson's print shop, tucked between a dry cleaner and a bodega on 5th Street. The owner, a man in his 60s named Bill, looked nervous when I asked about Louis. I can't, he started. He forged a legal document, I said quietly. He's stealing his father's company. And he threatened someone to keep quiet about it. Please. Bill's shoulders sagged. He disappeared into the back and came back with a USB drive. CCTV footage, he said. I didn't feel right about it then, and I feel worse now. He came in here aggressive, demanding, said he needed a high-quality forged legal document. I needed the money, so I did it. But I kept the footage. I don't know why. Maybe I knew something was wrong. The video showed everything. Louis at the printer, examining the forged will, discussing the details with Bill, making the payment. The date and timestamp were crystal clear. I was downloading it to my computer when the shop door chimed. Louis walked in. For a moment we just stared at each other. Louis's eyes went from shocked to furious in about 2 seconds. What are you doing here? He demanded. I didn't answer. I just moved toward the back of the shop while Bill stood up, suddenly looking protective of me. Looking for something specific. Bill asked Louis loudly, positioning himself between us. I need to speak to my sister, Louis said, his voice tight. She doesn't want to speak to you, Bill said. And I think you should leave. I heard Louis demanding the CCTV footage as I slipped out the back exit, my laptop clutched against my chest. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely drive. Louis called me 3 times. Then he texted, Brooke, we need to talk. Now. I didn't respond. I drove straight to Andrew's office and handed him the USB drive. We have everything we need, Andrew said, watching the footage. But we need to use this carefully. And we need that recording. I have it, I said, playing the audio from dinner. Louis's voice filled the office, confessing to everything. Andrew looked at me with something like awe. This is going to destroy him, he said quietly. Louis called me again that evening. I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I was frustrated and drunk. Can we meet? Just to talk. I almost didn't go. But Thomas said this was the moment. If I ignored him, he'd get suspicious. We met at the same restaurant. Louis ordered wine again. But this time his hands weren't quite as steady. He was worried. I could see it in the way his jaw clenched. I said some things at the print shop, he started. Things I shouldn't have said. I let him talk. I let him explain that he was just joking around, that he didn't really mean it, that he was stressed about the funeral and Dad's death. But you do mean it, I said quietly. Everything you said. You planned this. You pushed me out. You threatened Evelyn. You forged Dad's will. Louis's face went white. I recorded everything, I continued. At dinner. Print shop. All of it. And I have the email evidence. The bribes. The fake reports. Everything. He stood up so fast his chair crashed backward. You can't prove. I already have, I said. And Evelyn is alive. She's going to testify. Louis grabbed my arm. If you do this, I will destroy you. I will. A server appeared instantly, cutting him off. Louis released me and walked out of the restaurant, his face twisted with rage. I sat there for a long moment, finally letting myself breathe. The burial was scheduled for a Thursday. The night before, Louis was already celebrating. I could see it in the way he moved through the family gathering at my parents' house. He was untouchable. He thought he'd won. My aunts and uncles hugged him, told him he was doing the right thing, taking control. My cousins seemed impressed by his confidence. I said nothing, smiled, played along. One of my cousins pulled me aside in the kitchen. "I heard Louis is doing something big tomorrow," she whispered. "At the funeral. Something that's going to shock everyone." I nodded and squeezed her hand. "You'll see," I said. That night I didn't sleep. I sat with Andrew and Susan in a hotel room, going over everything one last time. Papers, the recordings, the video, the will. "Are you ready?" Andrew asked. I thought about my father, about all the years I'd worked beside him, learning the business, earning the trust of clients and employees. About Louis's cruelty, his manipulation, his theft. "I'm ready," I said. The chapel was packed. My father had been respected in this city. Louis sat in the front row, wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than a month of my previous salary. He kept touching the forged will in his pocket like it was a good luck charm. The pastor spoke about my father's integrity, his honesty, his character. Every word was a knife in Louis's back. Then Louis stood up. He walked to the pulpit like he was born to stand there. He talked about being Dad's son, about learning from him, about carrying on his legacy. His voice cracked at exactly the right moment. People reached for tissues. Then he pulled out the forged will. "Dad wanted me to make sure you all knew that I'm taking over the company," he said. "It's what he wanted. And I'm going to honor his memory by building on what he created." Applause. Sniffles. Relatives nodding in approval. The pastor looked uncomfortable. Something didn't feel right to him. Louis smiled, satisfied, and started to sit down. The chapel doors opened. Susan walked down the center aisle like she was walking onto a stage. The entire room gasped. Louis's blood drained from his face so completely I thought he might pass out right there. She was alive. She was here. She was stepping forward. "That will is a forgery," Susan said, her voice steady and strong. "I was your father's attorney for 23 years. I'm holding his real will." She pulled the sealed envelope from her bag. "And I have evidence of fraud." The chapel erupted. People stood up. Someone shouted. Louis's hands were shaking. He looked at me and in that moment he knew. Susan played the recording of Louis's dinner confession through the chapel's sound system. His voice filled the room, bragging about manipulating Dad, about pushing me out, about threatening Susan. "By the time this probate finishes, it'll all be mine." People gasped. Several relatives covered their mouths. One of my uncles stood up and left in disgust. Then Susan projected the CCTV footage on the chapel screen. Louis at the print shop. Louis paying for the forged document. Louis's own hands handling the fake will. Louis started shouting. "This is a lie. You can't do this. That's edited. This is all. It's all documented," Susan said calmly. "And it's all admissible in court." Andrew Pierce stepped forward and handed Louis official documents. "You're being served with a fraud claim and an injunction," Andrew said. "Your inheritance is frozen pending probate proceedings. All access to company accounts is revoked. You have no authority over Dalton Construction." Louis's face twisted. "No, no, no." He tried to grab the documents, but Andrew stepped back. "Brooke, please, I didn't mean." "Yes, you did," I said quietly. "For a year you meant exactly this." Louis collapsed to his knees. Actually collapsed. His legs just gave out, and he fell forward onto the chapel floor. For a moment nobody moved. Then relatives started approaching, some looking concerned, others furious. My aunts stared at him like he was a stranger. An officer who'd been waiting outside, Andrew had arranged for police to be on standby, came forward and helped Louis to his feet. "I need to take you down to the station for questioning," the officer said. Louis was crying now, real tears, but not tears of remorse. Tears of rage at being caught. "You did this," he spat at me as they led him toward the door. "You sabotaged me. You sabotaged yourself," I said. "You just didn't realize how far a threat could go." He screamed something else as they took him out, but I didn't hear it. The chapel had gone quiet. Everyone was staring at me. After the burial, after the police had taken Louis away, Andrew pulled me aside and handed me an envelope. "Your father gave this to me 2 years ago," he said. "He asked me to give it to you on the day the truth came out. He said you would know when that was." My hand shook as I opened it. Dad's handwriting. His actual handwriting, not a letter written in crisis, but a calm, deliberate message. "Brooke, if you're reading this, then you've done what I couldn't do. You've protected what I built. I'm proud of you. I was weak when it came to your brother. I wanted to believe he could change, and instead I enabled him. You're stronger than I was. You have integrity I spent years trying to teach you. You're my legacy. Not the buildings or the money, you are. Dad." I read it 3 times before I could see through my tears. 2 weeks later, I walked into the Dalton construction office for the first time as the official head of the company. The employees were waiting. They'd known the truth by then. The news had spread through the business community like wildfire. Louis had tried to destroy his sister's reputation to steal their father's company, and she'd caught him with ironclad evidence. Some people saw me as a victim. Others saw me as someone who'd fought back. I was proud of being both. "I know this has been chaos," I told them in the boardroom. "But that ends today. My father built this company on honest deals and treating people fairly. That's exactly what we're going back to." The room erupted in applause. Nathan came up to me afterward and apologized for not believing me earlier. I forgave him immediately. Fear makes people act in ways they wouldn't normally act. I spent the next weeks rebuilding, calling clients personally, restructuring projects, reinstating employees who'd been pushed out, honoring the commitments my father had made. It was exhausting and incredible. 6 weeks after the funeral, I got an email from the police department. Louis wanted to meet with me. He was out on bail, awaiting trial, and he'd requested a meeting through his lawyer. I didn't want to meet him, but Thomas advised it might be good for the case to show the court that Louis had tried to reconcile or confess further. We met in a conference room with lawyers present. Louis looked smaller than I remembered, hollowed out. His expensive suit hung loose on him. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was hoarse. I didn't respond. "I know that doesn't mean anything," he continued. "But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I was angry that Dad loved you more. I was jealous that you were better at this than me. And instead of trying harder, I decided to tear you down. You threatened Evelyn," I said coldly. "You broke into her house. You tried to steal Dad's legacy. I know. Why would I forgive that?" Louis looked up at me. "I'm not asking you to. I needed you to know that I know what I did." I stood up. "That's not enough. It will never be enough." I walked out of that room and never looked back. The trial lasted 3 months. The evidence was so overwhelming that Louis's lawyers advised him to take a plea deal. He did, admitting to fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. He received 5 years in prison. The judge made a statement about the importance of family honesty and the severity of exploiting a parent's vulnerabilities. She commended me for my courage in exposing the truth instead of letting it slide. The business community took notice. My integrity, the same integrity my father had written about, became known throughout the city. New clients came to me. Larger projects. Better opportunities. But the most important thing was that I'd reclaimed what was mine. Not just the company but the knowledge that I'd fought for what was right. I sit in Dad's old office now. My office. The desk is exactly as he left it. The photos on the wall show him shaking hands with city officials, standing in front of buildings his company had constructed. His legacy is everywhere. But he was right about one thing. The buildings and the money aren't the real legacy. It's integrity. It's the choice to do the right thing even when it costs you. It's standing up to someone you love because you love yourself more. Louis called me once from prison, asking if I'd ever visit. I didn't answer. Susan came back to work. She runs Dad's charitable foundation now, helping young people in construction. She's happier than I've ever seen her. I've dated someone new. Someone who knew my story before he knew me, who told me he admired my strength. Every morning I come to this office and look out at the skyline, at the buildings Dad created, at the city he shaped. And I whisper something I've come to believe with absolute certainty. Justice isn't loud. It's precise. It's the careful gathering of evidence. It's the patience of a person who knows they're right. It's the moment when the truth, told without anger, breaks everything that was built on lies. That's real justice. And it's finally mine.